see more Switch 2s being moved around in Spain, for example. But I think it's safe to say that if a console has a price drop in France, Germany, and England, it is very much not selling well in Europe, especially when you consider this.
Yeah, $20 fucking or however many pounds that is. Holy shit, man.
Price drop occurs in the first 4 months of the console's life, and when you consider the software sales, you consider all the various articles that have surfaced, the experience of people that actually work in retail, and you can kind of come to a conclusion that this is not about loss leaders, this is not about companies trying to get back to their customers, this is not the
This is insane fucking code, bro.
European thing where people in America can scream and pout because they're not getting price drops, but people in Europe are. No, this is a clear
Just admit you were wrong, bro. It's okay.
indication that all signs are pointing towards the Switch 2 not doing well in Europe, and that has ultimately led to a price drop. So now you have roughly 1/3 of the entire market of people that could purchase a console being in a location where they can buy it cheaper than they could initially when it launched, also known as a discount or a price drop. Another third of the market
A 5% discount.
being in Japan, where the console is basically selling out every single week, and in Japan, they get the console cheaper than everywhere else in the world. And the final third being the United States. So while I thought that we'd reach 30 million units until the Switch 2 would start to ripple out with price drops all around the world, it actually took less than 10 million units until already some of the largest markets around the world have already started to see price drops. And now with these price drops and these holiday discounts, two things which are very uncommon this early on in your console life cycle,
Yeah, look, 20 euros off. That is not even a large discount. That's like literally the equivalent of taxes when you walk into a fucking GameStop. You're basically getting sales tax for free. Holy shit, this is insane code, bro. Absolutely insane code.
can comfortably say that, yeah, Nintendo can reach its forecast and can even increase its forecast, because if around 1/3 of the market is already
a fucking $20 discount, and this dude's like, it's over, bro. It's over. $20 discount, baby, for fucking Black Friday. Look at all these fucking retards. Is it a boycott if I have no money to get Nintendo? No, you're just a broke bitch. I'm not boycotting. I'm just not interested anymore. If you ever feel useless, remember this channel exists. All those in the comments. Watch the latest J Hard video. I don't know what the fuck that is, but I agree. If you ever feel worthless, yeah, anyone with a properly functioning brain knows this is rage bait. How this channel went from the Switch 2 will fail and here's why to 15 minutes of begging people to boycott Nintendo so that it hopefully underperforms over the holiday season. The absolute state. I want to get to that part. Oh yeah, boycott Nintendo. Look. Yep, he's got like a 20-minute segment at the end begging people not to buy it so he can be proven correct. What a fucking loser.
able to buy this thing at a discount, that would imply that there has been a significant price drop, allowing more units to be moved off of shelves. Now, the funny thing is, in France, there's already been 2 price drops. In England, there have been a couple different discounts that have been applied more than once. Germany is still a minor discount, but it is one nonetheless. It'll be interesting to see how much more this develops into the holiday season. Prior to all of these discounts, the general narrative online was very adamant and very determined to tell you that there is no point in waiting for the holidays because there's no chance in hell that the console drops in price. And this was pretty commonly agreed upon worldwide. Now they're telling you there's no chance that there's going to be a Black Friday deal going into the holiday season for the Switch 2.
Dude, 5% off is not even a remotely notable discount. Sorry. 5% is like nothing. Literally fucking nothing.
Erica. And I'm bringing that up because if there is a Black Friday deal for the Switch 2 announced in the next week or two, I want you to pay close attention to how quickly they shift the narrative. Because that's what they did for England and that's what they did for France. They'll probably start saying things along the lines of the Switch 2 is doing so well that they can get a little bit more flexible.
They're not announcing a Black Friday deal, you dumbass. Amazon is discounting it. They're taking money out of their own cut from selling the Switch 2. Nintendo is not doing a discount on the Switch 2. Amazon is cutting into their own margins in order to move units, in order to get people to buy that and other shit from their website. This is very common around the holiday season for Black Friday. Remember when Target used to sell the $3 toasters? I do, because I got one. But, yeah, this is so common.
Lower the price, or they're trying to create some kind of competition between different stores because they ship out so many units. Or my favorite one, they assume that people just altogether decided to stop trying to buy and scalp things and they're not buying things as intensely as they were during COVID times. Even though we still see very clearly, when you look at the Japanese market, the console is immediately selling out every single week when it ships out. And scalpers are flipping that thing for much more than it's worth. And this is primarily because in Japan, there is high demand for the Switch 2, and there's high demand for the Switch 2 in Japan because it's priced lower. But the point is, in regards to this very long...
Only one version of it. The bundles are not priced lower. So, also, Why would they be reselling for above retail if people were only buying? Because they're cheap.
Introduction. While Nintendo has shipped over 10 million units as of September 30th, and yes, those are shipped units, not sold units. You can watch my previous video if you need proof of that. But yeah, while
every company reports shipped units, dude. If you compare the number of console sales between PS4, Xbox, Switch, Switch 2, PS5, take your pick, every company reports shipped units. That is the industry standard practice.
Nintendo managed to already ship 10 million units in the first 4 months, and they increased their forecast from 50 million to 90 million. This tells me that the unexpectedly very quick discounts for the Switch 2 are doing well, and potentially we could even be seeing more discounts all around the world for the Nintendo Switch 2 as we get closer towards the end of its first fiscal year. Now, backing up just a little bit for the ship versus sold conversation, Nintendo obviously makes their money once their consoles are shipped out. When Best Buy, Target, whatever retailer buys it from them, Nintendo gets paid as far as they're concerned. That's a sold console. And while shipped units are the units that are most commonly tracked throughout the product's life, because that's always what's reported in these quarterlies, it is very common for companies to also share sell-through units, which are units that actually make it towards the customer's hands, specifically this going on in the console's life. So, for example, by the 4-month mark for the PlayStation 4, Sony's financials indicated that they had shipped out 7.6 million units. These would be units shipped through the end of March, but then they also announced that by April 6th, 7 million were sold. So we know that by the end of March, they had shipped out 7.6 million, and 7 million of that was sold, leaving 600,000 kind of floating around. This kind of tells us that the PlayStation 4 had a very high sell-through rate. Now, in regards to the PlayStation 5, we didn't get our first bit of news until July 18th when it said that they hit 10 million. This was 10 million sold through. By the end of June, prior to that July, they had shipped out 10.1 million PS5s. So once again, we see a very high sell-through rate for the PlayStation 5. We see it very clearly. 3 weeks after they shipped out over 10 million units, they hit that 10
All I hear is cope, bro.
million number. Now, with the case of the Switch 2, we know that as of September 30th, it shipped out 10.36 million. From September 30th until November 4th, over a month, we never got any bit of news of how many sold through Nintendo Switch 2s were available. This tells me that prior to the report that was done on November 4th, the console never hit 10 million sold. Because if it did, it would have been very normal for Nintendo to be like, as of September 30th, we shipped out 10 million, and then October 20th, after Pokemon launched, we hit 10 million. It's very common practice for a console to do this. It's not abnormal. Companies don't only pride themselves in how many units they're able to sell in, they also like to share the sold through number so you can get a feel for how many people are actually buying this console. And Nintendo is no exception to this. They told everybody that they had sold through 3.5 million units in the first 4 days. What they didn't do was tell people how many units were actually sold at the end of.
Dude, I remember when you bought the PS4, they gave you that little singular earbud that plugged into your controller. Like, it wasn't even an actual pair of earbuds, it was just one earbud that went in your right ear, and it was super uncomfortable. And that was the mic for the PS4 for a while.
June, but they did tell people that they had shipped 5.8 million. And then only about 3 weeks after that, leading to the end of July, they had hit 6 million sold. But when they were at 6 million sold, we actually don't know how many were shipped. And given the amount of stock that we've seen available from the end of July up until this point, I predicted this back then. I'm of the opinion that when it hit 6 million sold, it was already at 8 million shipped. Because all around the entire world, the
6 million.
Switch 2 was available in stock, which means that the selling number was much higher than the sell-through number.
ChatGPT. If Nintendo has 4 console factories, and each factory can produce 1 console per 2 hours, is it possible for them to create 6 million Switch? But yeah.
It wasn't like the PlayStation 4, nor the PlayStation 5, nor even the Nintendo Switch, because while the Switch launched in March, it was not readily available on shelves until the end of October, and that's when Odyssey launched. So going into these financials, I expected that we'd see a ship number going into the 10 millions. I even made a post about it. What I was much more intrigued about was the sold through numbers, which obviously Nintendo has not shared, and I think they haven't shared it with good reason. And that reason is because I think they were able to ship out 10 million units in preparation for the holidays to get them well ahead of the curve before Pokemon's launch as well as Christmas, and therefore they have way more units out there than was actually being bought. And I'll be honest, I think by the end of September, this console was only sitting in like 7.5 million people's hands. And there are a few reasons I believe that.
Dog, this is just insane, Cope. Let's just skip through this part. This part's obnoxious. I don't want to hear him cope so fucking hard about console sales. It's like, it's all so tired.
Right, because logic would imply that if a console is selling well, the games are going to be selling well too. But what we see here are fairly low numbers for Switch 2 sold games. But
wow, 2 games per unit is extremely good right out of the gate. The console's been out for like a few months. A 2-game attach rate is great.
there's actually more to the story here, because a big part of the reason why the software sales over these past 3 months were much lower than anybody could anticipate is because of Nintendo holding back on all of their first-party titles in order to shift as many third-party titles as they can. I have been pushing this for 3 months, and it's time for me to collect my reward. Nintendo is a first-party device. You buy this thing for the first-party games, and on occasion, somebody will buy a third-party title. But let's figure out exactly how bad this is. Now, keep in mind, this is selling numbers.
I mean, this is like an hour-and-a-half-long therapy session for a mentally ill individual.
Ship numbers, if you will. 20.62 million Nintendo Switch 2 software sold in. If you subtract 9.57 million, all that...
Like, this shit's a mental illness, bro, honestly. Imagine dedicating this much time to just coping over the fact that you were wrong about the Switch 2. It's just sad.
Remains is 11.05 software sold. That 9.57 is Mario Kart. Now, we actually do not have a sold through number for Mario Kart, but what we do know is that, based off of Nintendo's report, 9 out of every 10 people that have purchased a Switch...
Yeah, the PS4 Gold... Yeah, I think it was the PS4 Gold headset that I had. That was pretty decent. It was actually a pretty comfortable headset. The PS5, like, Pulse headset or whatever one that launched with is terrible. Like, the ear cups felt like they put, like, shriveled up, like, styrofoam or something in there. A lot of companies. Massive quality downgrade.
Who have played Mario Kart. Now, that sounds like such a weird way to put it, right? Like, why would they say 9 out of 10 that I've played the game? Why did they say I've bought the game? And I'm just saying, personally,
So, the reason why there's no new Mario Kart content is because they're figuring, this is my guesstimate, is because the majority of people are going to be playing Mario Kart post-Christmas. So there's going to be probably 5, 6, 7 million people that get Mario Kart at Christmas. My guess is Mario Kart World's going to get a big content update, if it's going to, sometime in the spring. Because then the people who just got it for Christmas will have played the base game and the original content, and then they'll get the content update a few months later and make it seem like they're getting continuous content updates. I understand why Nintendo doesn't just want to shove everything out the door as quickly as possible, because all these people who are going to be getting Mario Kart for Christmas, you know, if it launches with a bunch of DLC content, then they're going to complain, oh, well, where's the content updates in 3 to 4 months? Even though it just got content updates because they just started playing the game after the content updates were added, it doesn't feel new to them. So my guess is they're waiting until after the holidays. That would be my guess.
because they're taking into account Switch 2s that have multiple accounts on there. You know, you might have a family console that has 3 or 4 users, and all 4 of those users might have played Mario Kart, so that's how they gauged it. Either way, we don't have an exact attachment rate. We do know that of all of the Switch 2 consoles that were shipped, 8.1 of them were bundled. The point is here that you can't really make any conclusions about Mario Kart World. You just know that a lot of the units that were sold to people were bundled in. But when you're looking at the ship numbers, you can say that, you know, like 80% of the consoles that were shipped included Mario Kart on them. And you can also kind of get a feel based off of sales patterns that 80 to 90% of all people that bought a Switch 2 bought it with Mario Kart. So it leaves a pretty small percentage of people that actually bought a physical copy of Mario Kart at $80. Because again, we're looking at selling numbers. So of this 9.57 million of all the physical copies that are remaining after you remove the bundles, this includes all of the physical copies of Mario Kart that are currently sitting on shelves all around the world. So again, it's inconclusive. But when we're looking at strictly at ship numbers, selling numbers, we have 20.62 million units. You can minus the 9.57 that's Mario Kart, and your remainder is 11.05. Beyond that, you can minus the 3.49 million for Donkey Kong, and now you're sitting at 7.56 million software that was sold that's not Mario or Donkey Kong in the first 4 months of the Nintendo Switch 2's life. But we're going to break it down even further. On the last report that took us to the end of June, there were 8.67 million softwares that were sold, and 5.63 million of that was Mario Kart. Which means in that first quarter, of all the games that were available, 3.04 million of them were not Mario Kart. And a huge amount of these 3.04 million included the 2 Legend of Zelda Switch 2 edition titles. Now, Bonanza is interesting. We kind of already shared that there were 2.6 million sold-through copies of Donkey Kong Bonanza. And
this got 39,000 views. An hour and a half long, just pure code session, bro. It wasn't worth it.
we have kind of come to a conclusion that's anywhere between one.
You made like $200 from this video. Was it really worth it, dude?
And 3 to 1 in every 4 Switch 2 consoles that were actually people that also bought Bonanza. But what's even more interesting is that with Donkey Kong Bonanza in the United States, based off of an online Q&A session with Matt Piscatella, Donkey Kong Bonanza in the United States of America has a 50% attachment rate, which means that like, as of the end of September, you're looking at roughly 1.3 million copies of Donkey Kong Bonanza were sold in the United States. And we know that 2.6 million were sold worldwide. So half of all copies of Donkey Kong Bonanza were sold in the US, and the other half are spread out all throughout the entirety of the rest of the world.
What's wrong with that?
Which means if you rule out America from the equation, Bonanza did significantly worse on a worldwide scale than it did in the United States. This is basically a game that did...
Okay, what's wrong with that? There's plenty of games that do that.
pretty well in America. Again, not as good as Breath of the Wild or Mario Odyssey on their launches with the Switch 1, but still, it's a very good launch. And more...
Yeah, no shit, it's Donkey Kong. It's not Mario or Zelda. Yeah, imagine that, dude. A game that's not on the caliber of Mario and Zelda doesn't do Mario and Zelda numbers. Yeah, Donkey Kong is not even remotely as popular as Mario and Zelda, but let's compare it to Mario and Zelda sales. Oh, man, it really is funny.
Slightly above average on a worldwide scale, but it was being marketed and still is being treated as the flagship.
This would be like comparing Doom Eternal sales or Doom the Dark Ages sales to Call of Duty. Like, yeah, they're technically made by the same company, Microsoft, but one is a massive franchise, one of the biggest in the entire gaming industry, and one is a pretty niche boomer shooter. Yeah, technically they're both shooters, and technically they're made by the same company. But they don't have the same caliber of fan base.
Nintendo Switch 2 title alongside Mario Kart. This game has the highest of expectations, and it's under-delivering. And it's under-delivering in an era and in a timeline where it's the only game that's realistically of any interest to anybody that's buying a Nintendo Switch 2. Because they bought the console, it's packed with Mario Kart, and then the first thing they should want to buy is Donkey Kong Bonanza. But it's not providing that high attachment rate that you would expect out of something of this caliber. And obviously, in my opinion, the reason it's not achieving this attachment rate is because the people that are buying the Nintendo Switch 2 are not the hardcore Nintendo fandom. The hardcore Nintendo fandom is very much split online. I'd say maybe half of those sales have been lost to people that are upset that Nintendo decided to just go ham with the crazy prices going into the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, people like to laugh and say that the fact that this recent presentation showed that there's an 84% attachment rate of the Nintendo Switch 2, 84% of those people own Nintendo Switch 1s. And quite frankly, my counter to that is that everybody and their mother owned Nintendo Switch 1s. Whether it was a Sony fan, a PC gamer, Xbox owner, the Switch 1 was the secondary console for many people. And those people that own PlayStation 5s, as well as PCs or Xboxes, that also love their Nintendo Switch and specifically had it as a first-party device, they are most likely the ones to go out and upgrade their Switch 1 to a Switch 2 for higher performance. Because those are the types of people that care more about higher performance, not Nintendo fans. And this will also be reflected in the poor third-party titles because those people buy their third-party games.
Yours truly with the Nintendo derangement syndrome is real. It's sad, bro. This is absolutely sad.
Elsewhere. So they effectively grabbed a Switch 2 because it was available, and now they're waiting for their Smash Bros. And 3D Marios and new 3D Zeldas. Now, incidentally enough, these are also the same people that upgraded from their Switch to their Switch 2 because they expected a console that provides 4K and 60 frames per second. Or, at least
No one expected
60 frames per second in general, and they quickly come to realize that the Switch 2 is significantly more underpowered than they could ever have imagined, especially given how much Nintendo was really pushing that raw power. This is why after the most recent Nintendo Direct, the buyer's remorse for many people started to kick in. This is when people started to sell their consoles, when they started to realize that Madden, the AFC, any other third-party title is not powerful. It's at 30 frames per second. It's unplayable as far as they're concerned. By that point in time alone, there was already 6 or 7 million Switch 2 units sold through to customers. So when you tell me Nintendo has shipped out 10 million units already, I'm like, of course, because there were already 7 million people that had bought a Switch 2 by the time people started to realize that this thing was a ripoff. There were already 6 million units sold by the time Donkey Kong Bonanza had come out, which means there were probably 8 million shipped, which means that another 2 million over the course of the next 2.5 months being shipped out. I don't know what to tell you.
Dude, I fucking hate this world.
And had come out, which means there were probably 8 million shipped, which means that another 2 million over the course of
this world is like or I guess layer is the worst in the game, hands down. The toxic sludge, you can't like just go ape shit on the map because there's like toxic goo underneath everything that kills you. So, I'm not a fan of this world.
The next 2.5 months being shipped out. I don't know what to tell you. It's not really that impressive. Not unless we started to get sold through numbers. This just tells me that the console launched with ample stock, and they're going to have ample stock going into the holidays. That's all it tells me. Having 10 million consoles shipped as of the end of September does not suddenly magically make the months of August and September go away. The discourse online was very much extremely negative during those months, and with good reason. They were lame months with no games for play. And the funny thing is, despite all of this, when you look at Nintendo's financials to see how well this third-party push actually succeeded, you still see that while they outputted nothing effectively but Donkey Kong Bonanza, they were still sitting at roughly a 69% first-party rate as comparison to third parties for software sales. Those are percentages that don't include Mario Galaxy or Pokemon. So imagine how much that percentage is going to shoot up with the next quarterlies with all of the first-party titles that are coming in, specifically from Pokemon alone. They've tried to increase digital sales. They've done this with all of the update packs that they decided to release, amongst pushing out game key cards in order to make physical copies even less appealing for the masses that want to buy physical only. And even then, we saw the proportion of digital sales decrease over the past quarter as compared to the first quarter. And actually, the funny thing here too is that game key cards aren't even the reason why third-party titles didn't do well, because some of the third-party titles that have sold the best were game key cards. Once again, reiterating that the issue with the Nintendo Switch 2 is that it's primarily purchased to be a first-party device and not the fact that game key cards were put into place. So you can probably
how is it a problem that people buy the Nintendo Switch 2 for first party?
just accept that game key cards are going to be a thing for this console going forward. Because developers are showing very clearly that they do not care about how you feel about a physical version actually containing the data on there. And a very big reason why they're not going to care is because it's not worth the money for them to.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool if they did a Star Fox or F-Zero game. I really like the Star Fox Assault personally. I don't know if it's considered a hot take or not, but I'd be fine with another one of those like that. But yeah, F-Zero would be cool.
Have to pay Nintendo their exorbitant high fees in order to get their game physically sold on the Nintendo Switch 2 fully on a cartridge. And this should be a concern for a lot of Nintendo fans because, as we see clearly from all of this data, a very large percentage of people that use Nintendo consoles do so with physical ownership in mind. Even if today's Nintendo fandom leans more digital than they used to, it's still majority physical, significantly more than all of the other big companies, obviously talking about Sony here more than anything else. So keep that in mind in the future when you see that people are frequently comparing physical sales of games for Nintendo versus Sony, because the total sales for Sony are usually times 3 what the physical is, whereas for the Nintendo console, at best it's times 1.75 or times 2. And actually, back up to third-party sales once again. Third parties in general are struggling. Many of them have recently released their quarterly financials, and they're all showing drops in either revenue or profits.
Oh, fuck off.
Backing up to third-party sales once again. Third parties in general are struggling.
Dude, over 100 jobs in the UK. They're not real jobs. It's like the fucking women and, soy cucked men who make Japanese games gay for a Western audience. So, if anything, those are great people to have fired. We need more of that.
Many of them have recently released their quarterly financials, and they're all showing drops in either revenue or profits or sales in general. This is mostly happening because the general shift in the industry, away from all of these expensive games and luxuries specifically, because everybody's being priced out. Free-to-play games are taking over. Subscriptions are becoming more commonplace. So it's kind of interesting because we're seeing all of these third parties just flood towards the Nintendo Switch 2, and everybody in their mind is like, well, of course they're coming towards the Switch 2. It's the fastest selling console, so they want to get in on that. But no, it seems more likely that they're getting desperate. So they're like, hang on a second, there's a market of people that will buy stuff at lower quality. Let's try to sell it to them over there in hopes that we can gain some money out of this. And I do wonder how much of this is Sony's fault. Maybe Sony used to pay these companies a lot of money for their exclusivity, and they decided to kind of ease up on it because they're like, I make more money just sitting here having people pay for PlayStation Plus and buy Madden, EAFC, and just play Fortnite on here all the time.
You really think that Sony's Dude, this guy is an idiot. He really is. This is pure mid-wittery at its finest.